Well, hello, welcome to the channel. Now, I have had the GoPro 9 for about a month, so I've been testing it across that period of time, going to multiple places that you may or may not have seen on the channel, so go and check those latest videos out. And if you don't delve into the settings on these, for the price you pay, you're just not going to get the best from it. So that's exactly what this tutorial, if you like, is about, is to give you all the information you need to get the best possible image quality from these, and it's applicable to all sports. If you dial them in, you won't be disappointed. So here it is, a year has passed already, and yes, moving forward with the channel, I felt I had to purchase it. That's just what happens when you create content at this level and you're pushing out weekly edits. You want it to be the best it can be, and moving forward with the generation of GoPros kind of makes sense. And there's some really nice stuff on here, but ultimately the settings, if you don't put in some custom settings, you're never going to get the best from these, and that's exactly what this is all about. So let's get to the back. Now, I will give you the clearest picture possible, but ultimately this is the same for a good majority of GoPros, and although you'll be missing some of the features, you can take this back all the way to the GoPro 7 really. But what you need to do, you have these custom profiles, and I'm just going to stick to my standard one, which is generally the one that I'll use out on the trails. Now, first and foremost, the resolution and frame rate I always have at 4K and 30 FPS. I do find that 30 FPS just works really well in low light. 60 just makes everything look really detailed but slow, and 24 just doesn't give you enough detail, I don't think, and it struggles quite a bit in that low light situation. But if you want epically fast looking footage, then 24 is a good way to go, but 30 is absolutely spot on. Now, some of you may ask, why don't I use 5K, which is one of the main features on this new edition? And pure and simply, it's because it doesn't have super view. It only goes to wide, and by the time you crop in with the Hypersmooth, it just doesn't give me the picture that I'm looking for out on the trail. For the lens setting, I'll always have it at super view. I just find it gives you the most immersive experience when going down the trail. I will adjust that when I'm doing intros and outros to the channel. You can go to narrow on this, which is really good, but it just eliminates that fisheye, and linear seems to be a good one that I normally like to delve into. But otherwise, a good 90% of channel content for me is actually done in super view. Now, Hypersmooth, this one is loaded with Hypersmooth 3. It does make a huge difference. I mean, it's only noticeable when you start looking back at your footage from previous generations. But with the Hypersmooth, you can either just have it on, or you can actually boost it. But just something to be wary of, when you have it on, it crops the 10%. So that means you lose about 10% of that sort of outer image. So it will zoom in slightly. And then when you turn it on again, it crops in just ever so slightly again. But I even find in super view that you still get an absolutely amazing picture. Scheduled capture, duration, hindsight, timer, zoom. I don't touch any of those settings at all, so just leave those as default. Now, if you don't dive into the ProTune settings on any of your GoPros, then quite simply you are not getting the most from your camera. But the first one that we'll delve into is the bitrate setting. I always have that set to high. That will capture 100 megabits per second. And the amazing thing about that is it just captures so much data that when you take it into post-production and you play around to get even better results, you've got the detail there to be able to do it because of that bit rate. So select that at high. I always leave the shutter at auto, but the EV comp I always put to -1 on every single GoPro I've ever had. So EV comp is exposure value compensation, and they come at 0 as default out of the box. And I always find that set at 0, it just overexposes. So the downside to that is it will brighten up the image so much that you lose the detail. And in certain situations, it's been useless footage for me. So if you just darken that EV comp ever so slightly by putting in -1, it retains the detail, and it's so much easier to then expose correctly from a darker image. You can't do it the other way because you'll just lose all that detail. Now, white balance. This is a new one for me, really. I've always known what it's about, but I've never really played with it. And having owned this for about a month now, I have now sort of discovered that white balance set at 5500 Kelvin seems to produce an amazing picture. Now, you've got to bear in mind that these cameras don't know what you're doing. So when you're chucking yourself down a trail at 20, 30 miles an hour, there's a lot of data that needs to be processed, and the camera if you give it the best chance of doing that, will give you a better result. Now, ordinarily, I'd normally leave that in auto, and I always found that the shadows weren't correct and the highlights were just blown out. But by setting it at 5500 for a huge majority of sports, that will give you the best white balance across the scale. So I highly recommend it, give it a go, and in post-production it's so noticeable what that does. ISO minimum I will always set at its lowest value of 100 and the maximum at 3200. Now the reason I've gone higher on this, because on previous models I'd normally set it at 1200, it's just the GoPros are getting better, so the noise at 3200 is totally workable. So in post-production I can remove some of that noise and it still gives me an amazing picture for what this device actually does. Now sharpness, that might be a personal preference, but I leave it at medium and then I do some post-production sharpening, so I sort of retain that detail in post-production. But there's the key setting there. Now if you leave that at GoPro color, I've got some examples of me hitting the trails in different settings, so stay tuned for that. But I find that if you set it to flat, you can then have the ability to adjust saturation, clarity, and you really can play with the image to get the best replication of colors that you felt were there on that day. If you leave it in GoPro color, it does a good job, I'm not going to deny, but it really can blow things out and make the trail look completely different to how it felt on the day. So it really depends what sort of quality you're looking for out of your footage. Raw audio I leave off, and the wind I leave off. I've got no mods that I can stick to this, so that just stays as is. But that's the settings ultimately that I use for my GoPro 9. Now while the wind setting has improved and I've left my setting off that you saw, you do have a microphone here and there's one underneath here also. And when you're going down a trail at a particular speed, and if it's a blustery, windy day, it does pick up that wind and it's so frustrating. So I still find myself using one of these, and this is the Wind Slayer. This particular version, covered in mud, is the GoPro 8, but it fits on there. It covers up that port right here and it covers underneath, and I just find it gives you ultimate sound quality for the sport that I'm doing, in particular mountain biking, but it will cover a good majority of you out there. You'll see some people, they stick dead cats on there and they'll have these fluffy bits sticking off all over the place. I just don't think that's neat, and I always find that this just gives you a bit more protection when you're going down a trail as well. So what's the point in showing you all the settings that I use for my GoPro 9 but also can be used across a wide range of GoPros if I don't show you some sample footage? So I went up to my local, went down a couple of trails, and I've pieced together a couple of clips that I think will just highlight why it's so important to delve into that pro tune element of any GoPro. So the first bit of footage, I'm just going down a trail. I was having a ride at the end of the day with my mates, so it's all about having fun. And I'm kind of waffling on to myself about certain things when it comes to this, because that edit was always in the back of my mind. But there's two versions of it, so you'll see a non-graded where it's just come straight out of the camera into the PC and uploaded to YouTube, which is what you'll see. And then you'll see the graded version where I've used a program called DaVinci Resolve. It's a free program as well, but does require quite a powerful PC to actually operate it smoothly, bearing in mind the quality and just how big the files are on these things. But you'll see that with the right saturation, exposure, clarity, and just that correct color range across the board, just the difference between the two. Gonna do graded and non-graded so that you can see the difference post-production. Wow. Yeah, don't expect any lightning speeds today. This is slick. Wow. God, I mean, last Thursday it was running pretty sweet, but what a difference a week makes. As we cross over. And what you'll be able to see with that colour grading is all the beautiful colours of the autumn. And without doing it, you can see that actually it's still a decent picture, but there's just no sort of clarity, saturation, all that good stuff. No vibrancy to anything.
Now the second bit of footage, remember I went into that color profile and I mentioned GoPro color. If you don't have the ability to do any color correction because you just want to take it off of the GoPro straight into the PC and then upload, don't have time to do the rest of it, then the GoPro color is going to be your best option. And I've done a clip, but you'll see between that sort of flat profile where I've color corrected it and GoPro color that they're worlds apart.
There we go, nothing to correct here, so if you were to run this setting straight out of the box, you'll be delighted with the results, especially for those that don't do all that post-editing and don't want to colour correct and stuff. I don't personally use it because I find it doesn't have a true representation of what the colours were like on that particular day. Like oversaturates and just all completely out of balance really, but still does a great job. So give it a go.
Well, that's it. I hope it's been helpful. It's just a tutorial giving you the settings that I think will be hugely popular across a wide range of sports. Give it a go. There's no point buying one of these and not actually trying the settings. If you want the maximum from it, then, you know, dive into it and have a go and try it for yourself. Hope you've enjoyed it though. If you have, give it a thumbs up, throw your comments in down below because I'd love to hear what you've got to say. And of course, press the logo down the bottom there, the subscribe button. If you press that bell notification as well, you'll be notified of future uploads. I'd love to see you come back for more content. But until then, I'll see you for the next one.